When you're feeling triggered, you can fight for your ego or you can fight for your evolution. In this edition of Thursday's Thought, I discuss the truth behind our triggers and I share a personal and recent experience where I was feeling triggered. Yes, me. Tune in and learn the difference between a reaction and a response. The 3 things you need to know in order to shift from reacting to responding, and why you need to drop the shame around feeling triggered. If you dig this podcast, stay in the loop by signing up for my weekly emails. Sign up today at rubyfremon.com/subscribe. The link will also be in the show notes. And whether you're a loyal thought leader, thank you so much, or a brand new listener, thank you for being here. Please take a moment to download a few episodes and drop a rating and review on iTunes. And for extra bonus points, share the podcast with a friend. The more ears we have on this, the better. Now it is time to dive deep into the truth behind our triggers.
Welcome to today's Thought Leader, where I'm challenging you to rise up, speak up, and create a movement. I'm your host, Ruby Fremon, and I'm here as a catalyst for you, the new generation of thought leaders. Join me every week as I dive into raw and real conversations that will help you amplify your presence, influence, and impact.
Hey, thought leaders, I am back with you with another edition of Thursday's Thought. And today's thought is, when you're feeling triggered, you can fight for your ego or you can fight for your evolution. So the inspiration for today's episode comes from a real life experience, something that I experienced this week. And let's be honest, I was feeling triggered, and I was feeling triggered from someone else feeling triggered. Now, in the line of work that I do and that most of you listening do, we show up online a lot on a daily basis. We put ourselves out there, we put our messages out there, we put our lives out there for people to see, to experience, because we are building our movements and our brands, and showcasing who we are is a huge, huge part of that. But with that comes the opportunity to be judged, to be perceived in a certain way, to be misunderstood, to be disrespected, to be hated on. And let's face it, all of these things, the judgments, the hate, all of this shit comes from people's perceptions of us. And other people's perceptions of us is not the truth. Our perceptions are based upon our internal environments. So even these perceptions that you have of other people or things or experiences or places, these perceptions that you have, you create these perceptions based on what you know. And what you know is based on your personal experiences. So for example, if you are someone who has been abused or traumatized throughout your life, then your lens of perception is going to come from that place. It's going to come from that place of, I've been abused, I've experienced trauma. And when we live from that lens, as someone who has survived abuse, as someone who has survived and moved through trauma, I'm speaking from personal experience now, we can look through that lens of trauma and see everything as dangerous or unsafe or uncertain. We can perceive other people as bad. We can be easy to point the finger because we're in that trauma-induced state. But when we do the work, the inner work that I talk about all the fucking time, when we do the work to heal through our traumas, when we take responsibility for today, Okay. Forget what happened to you. We can't take responsibility for how people treated us. But if we take responsibility for today, for where we stand right now, for our own healing, to get better, to feel better, then we start to perceive things from a different lens. Now, no one's perceptions are wrong or right. It simply is. And that's the beauty of it. That's also the frustrating piece to it. Because sometimes you're going to sit there and you're going to think, I'm right. Because I've done all this work, I know better. But at the end of the day, we're all doing the best that we can with what we know and what's available to us. So I felt that that piece was really important to share before I really dive into the topic of being triggered. So what had happened was, on one of my posts, I actually had a former client write a comment, which she's entitled to do, and share her thoughts, which she's entitled to do. But the way in which it was shared felt very, very passive aggressive. The way in which it was shared felt like an attack. And it was very much her reacting from a triggered state. She was triggered by something I wrote, or the way in which I've been showing up. And this isn't the first time that this has happened. Now, I'll admit, I then went into a reactive state. Reactions often lead to more reactions. When someone is in a reactive state, that can often lead to other people getting into reactive states. And I got into a reactive state. Did I immediately act from that reactive state? No. I wrote something, deleted, wrote, deleted. I didn't press post because I knew that I was still formulating my thoughts around this. What I knew for certain, and what I took ownership for, is that in my own mind, with myself, in how I was feeling in that moment, I was feeling triggered from her trigger. I was feeling triggered from her reaction towards me. And I took that as an opportunity to evolve. And I took a really long, hard look at myself and said, why am I feeling what I'm feeling? Because these are her thoughts. This is not who I am. And I realized it's because what she was hitting on is one of my deepest wounds, which I am still working on to this day. You know, I'm not fully healed. I don't believe that we ever get to a place of being fully healed. We can be fully devoted to our healing journey, but fully healed, no, because we're growing every day. So we're constantly learning new things and experiencing new things. So for me, my deepest unresolved wound that I am actively working on is the wound of feeling unseen and misunderstood. And her reaction and what she wrote triggered me to feel unseen and misunderstood. Now, I for sure responded. I believe I responded from a very grounded state. By the time I actually hit enter to respond, because my goal was really to come at it from a place of growth and not ego, even though my ego was hurt. I mean, let's just be honest. I am human. We all have egos, and my ego was hurt. But I responded twice. And then after her last response, I just chose to close the whole thing off because it was very obvious that there was a perception that was created in concrete, and there was nothing that I could do to shift her perception. And that's when I realized, holy shit, I'm trying to shift her perception of me. And this is the very thing that I talk about all the time. This is like one of the basic foundational blocks of what I teach. And how I work with my clients and the leaders who choose to work with me, is that we are not here to please everyone, right? We just need to find that peace within ourselves. We need to find that confidence within ourselves to be us, to unleash us, to be the fullest expression of who we fucking are. And I've done so much work around this. I cannot tell you everything in one episode in regards to what I have done around this, but I've been at this since 2012 and in a very devoted way. And I still get triggered. And I'm sharing this, I'm choosing to share this experience with you, not to shame this former client or anything. She was reacting from what she knew, from what was available to her. And I was responding and reacting from what I knew and was available and what I know from my experience and what's available to me. But I share this to show you that even I, a conscious leader, can be triggered and can react. Now, when you're feeling triggered, you can fight for your ego or you can fight for your evolution. And in this experience, I caught myself wanting to fight for my ego. And I consciously then chose to fight for my evolution. How can I respond in a way that is actually going to help me evolve? So when you are feeling triggered, right? We hear this a lot. We also hear people say, like, you trigger me. Maybe you've said that before, and let me correct you on that. No one triggers you. You feel triggered by other people, whether it's their presence, their energy, their actions, how they show up in this world, what they've accomplished. You are triggered by them. They are not triggering you. You are triggered by them. And feeling triggered is a symptom. It's a symptom of an unresolved wound that you have within yourself. So when you're feeling triggered, that's actually an opportunity to dive deeper into your inner work. It's an opportunity for you to grow, to evolve. Just like I shared with my example of that experience triggering my deepest wound and feeling unseen and misunderstood, I saw that as an opportunity. Okay, this is an opportunity for me to actually start to work through this. Old Ruby would have fucking let it rip in the comment threads. But evolved Ruby chose to come at it from a place of integrity and prioritizing my growth, because that's important to me. Like I said earlier, reactions can often lead to more reactions, right? Like a lot of people are just fighting for their egos, and we can fall into that easily. We all have an ego. All this spiritual talk about like trying to get rid of your ego, that's bullshit. You cannot bypass something that is a part of you. Your ego is what grounds you into self. Without ego, you would just be this airy fairy thing that is not grounded in the 3D. Your ego is what puts you in the 3D. Your ego is your sense of I am. That is ego. So we need ego. But an inflated ego is when we try and fight for it, and it's all about I. So when I say reactions lead to more reactions, it can often lead to this fight for the ego. And we live in a very online digital space. You know, everyone's online and everyone's on social media, and the online space makes it really easy for people to drop into reactive states. Okay. And we see this all the time online, people arguing in social media comment threads, people fighting for their limitations and for their egos, people fighting to make someone right or wrong. Our fingers basically become trigger happy when we're triggered. Right? And we see this all the time. And yet there really is two ways that we can go about moving on from our triggered states. So when you're triggered, you can either react or you can respond. And there is a very, very big difference. So when you react, this is when you're fighting for your ego. This is when you are responding to an external stimuli. So you're not actually checking in with yourself. You're simply responding from an external stimuli. And you do not take responsibility for this reaction. Okay. And you've probably seen this before. You've probably done it before. I know I have. So you have this reaction from this triggered space, and then you don't take responsibility for the reaction because you're like, hey, let me blame, let me point the finger because I'm right, they're wrong, they did this to me, they're the reason why I'm feeling this way. That, my friends, is a reaction, okay? Now, to respond while you're in a triggered state is to fight for your evolution, right? So again, you can fight for your ego, or you can fight for your evolution. And when you are responding, you are taking a conscious action. Okay, you are consciously choosing what action to take. You're consciously choosing the words that you say. You're consciously choosing how you show up, and you take ownership for that. You take ownership for that. You take responsibility for that. That is response. And as a conscious leader, it's so important to notice all the ways in which you're reacting so you can shift and start responding instead. Because again, we're human beings, we're going to be triggered. Okay? We're going to be triggered. It's how you deal with that triggered state. It's how you choose to navigate through that triggered state that matters. And that's what separates the conscious leaders from the unconscious leaders. Okay, unconscious leaders are going to fucking react. Conscious leaders are going to respond. Now, in order to respond, and this is super important if you're not driving and you can write this down, I would highly recommend writing this down. So in order to respond when you are in a triggered state, you have to understand who you be. And in order to understand who you be, you must understand these three parts. Okay, so part one is, what do you value? Part two is, what's truly important to you? And part three is, what do you stand for? What do you not stand for? AKA boundaries. So let me break this down a little bit. So part one, what do you value? For me, integrity is number one. Integrity is number one. So for me, like, congruency is really important. Being my message and being everything that I teach is very, very important to me. So when I'm choosing to respond, that comes from a place of integrity, because I value integrity. When you respond versus when you react, let me start there. When you react, you forget what you value. You forget what's important to you. So for me, if I were to react in that situation, I would forget all about integrity. I would just throw that out the window, right? And not be aligned with my message and how I teach other people to show up. But when you respond, you keep your values in mind. Now, part two, what's truly important to you. So think of it this way. Is it more important for you to be right? Is it more important for you to find something or someone to blame? Or do you place importance on something greater? Your cause, your mission, your message, who you be, how you show up? Like, what's really, truly important to you? It's crucial that you understand this, because that's going to create a massive difference between reacting, and that's going to be the thing that switches you from reaction to responding, is if you really understand what's important to you. If it's more important to you to be right or to find someone to blame, cool. You can go off and react. But if it's more important for you to be aligned with your message, to be aligned with your vision, to be aligned with your values, then you'll come from a place of responding. And then the third part is, what do you stand for? What do you not stand for? So this is boundaries, right? You need to understand what it is that you stand for. For me, I'm going to stand up for my fucking cause. I'm going to stand up for my mission. I'm going to stand up for the fight that I'm putting out there for this movement of conscious leaders versus unconscious leaders, for people speaking their truth, for people doing the deep inner fucking work. I'm going to take a stand for that. What I will not take a stand for is other people's perceptions of me, meaning I am consciously choosing at this stage in my life to not prove myself to other people. So this experience that I shared with you at the beginning of the episode, I caught myself actually trying to prove myself to this person, trying to not debate, but counteract all these accusations that were made. For example, buying likes on my Facebook page or insinuating that I bought likes. And I said, no, I haven't bought likes. That's your perception. And I caught myself in that same breath, and I wrote it in the actual comment that I was writing. I actually shared this. I was like, I'm actually catching myself right now, doing something that I don't teach other people to do. And it feels very incongruent. And that's trying to validate who I am to you. So I'm just going to stop right here. Like, I literally wrote out my thought because I wanted other people to see. I wanted to take ownership for how it was showing up. I didn't want to delete the whole fucking thread because this is a learning opportunity, both for myself, for the person involved, and for everyone else watching. So for me, it was really important just as a human being to experience that, because I realized, wow, like, this is a massive opportunity for evolution for me. I've spent the majority of my life through my life experiences trying to prove myself to other people, trying to tell people, convince people of who I am. And again, my deepest wound is feeling unseen and feeling misunderstood. And that has led me down a path of deep, deep depression and crippling anxiety and all sorts of health issues. And I no longer fucking stand for that. I have not come this far to drop back into old patterns where I will try and prove who I am to other people. If you don't see me, you don't see me. I'm going to focus on those who do, period. So it was an amazing opportunity for me to just evolve and to grow from that space. And this is why I say it's so important for you to understand, like, what is it that you stand for? What don't you stand for? Right? Because that's going to help you shift from reaction to responding. So again, to recap, in order to respond when you're in a triggered state, you must understand who you be. And in order to understand who you be, you must understand these three parts. Part one is, what do you value? Part two is, what's truly important to you? And part three is, what do you stand for and what do you not stand for? Look, when you're feeling triggered, you can fight for your ego or you can fight for your evolution. I encourage you to fight for your evolution. Feeling triggered is not a bad thing. But so many people in the spiritual and personal development industry want you to feel bad about it and feel ashamed about it or feel guilty about it. And I say, fuck all of that. Own the fact that you feel triggered and take that as an opportunity to evolve. Because that right there is how you are going to start to really heal these unresolved wounds that you have that continue to come to the surface because you continue to be triggered. So when you're feeling triggered, you can fight for your ego, you can fight for your evolution. What do you choose to fight for? That's the question. Thank you so much for joining me for another edition of Thursday's Thought on Today's Thought Leader, where I'm challenging you to rise up, speak up, and create a movement. If you dig this episode, make sure you download a few more episodes and drop a rating and review on iTunes. And if you listen this far, I would love to hear from you. I want to know, when you're feeling triggered, what do you do? What are your patterns? Do you catch yourself? Are you committed to catching yourself? Do you naturally fight for your ego or fight for your evolution? And again, no shame attached. Just fucking own it. Because the moment you take ownership for this is the moment that you really begin to create change in your life. Okay, so drop me a line on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter. My handle is @IamRuby. And yes, you will hear from me directly. It's not a bot or an assistant. It's me. So drop me a line. Let me know what you think of this episode. Share with me what you do when you're feeling triggered. And if you dig this podcast and you have yet to sign up What are you waiting for? Sign up for my weekly emails at rubyfremont.com/subscribe. Not only will you get the weekly recap for the podcast, but you'll also get my weekly love punches. And they are super fucking good. So subscribe. Link is in the show notes. And again, reach out to me, and then make sure you check back on Monday for a fresh new episode of Today's Thought Leader featuring serial entrepreneur and host of the Six Figure Roadmap podcast, Cam Martinez. If you own a business, which most of you do, I assume, you'll definitely want to tune into this, because Cam and I discuss how to create meaningful strategic partnerships that will help you create a business that people and other businesses are going to want to be a part of. So check back on Monday, fresh new episode. Thank you so much, thought leaders. You are amazing. I absolutely adore you. Spread the word. Let's get this message out to more people, and I will see you or be in your ears on Monday.